What's up, family? This is Kristen Smallwood, and you're listening to the Thrive with Joy podcast, a special space I've created for us to come and reason together. Each week, I share life lessons and stories that challenge our perspective on how we're managing the relationships with ourselves, God, and others. I'm even inviting some special guests to help us unpack insights on how to experience lasting, harmonious bonds that abound in grace, forgiveness, and love. Let's get into it. What's up, family? Thank you for meeting me back in the room for another episode. I love watching a well-written movie. You know, one that has like a unique plot with twists and turns that you never see coming, and well-developed characters who actually feel like they belong in the story and weren't just cast in the movie because the director owed them a favor. One of the best parts of a movie is when it catches you off guard emotionally and you realize you are more engaged in that story than you ever intended on being. Like, have you ever been watching a movie and all of a sudden something happens with one of the characters and you find yourself tearing up and getting emotional while at the same time thinking to yourself, what am I crying for? You acting like it happened to you. I fall victim to that all the time. However, there are two very specific instances that come to mind when I think about getting overly emotional when watching TV. The first one is a movie that makes me cry every time I watch it. Like, it never fails. It's one of my favorite movies in the world, and that is When a Man Loves a Woman with Meg Ryan and Andy Garcia. Now, if you have never seen this movie before, you have got to watch it. I don't want to ruin it for those who haven't seen it, but there's this scene in that movie that tears me up every time. It's the scene where the couple is in the living room and they are in the midst of an argument. And the wife, who is battling with alcohol addiction, tells her husband, who has been trying everything he knows to try to keep their family from falling apart because of her addiction, that she's tired of him trying to make things better. And she would rather go to a halfway house to recover than stay in the house with him, because just hearing him say her name makes her want to come out of her skin. So this man, who has spent the entire movie trying to help rescue his wife from herself, stands there with complete defeat on his face and is like, okay, if that's how you feel, I'll leave. Because the last thing I want is to be the reason my wife wants to come out of her skin. And then he turns and walks up them stairs to start packing his things. Oh, I lost it. I was like, girl, why are you treating him like that? He is such a good man. After all he has put up with you, he been there taking care of you and them kids, and you gonna act a fool like that? Man, I was so disappointed in her. Heartbroken for him. My emotions was all over the place. Like, the way I was crying, you would have thought the movie was about me. I dare you to watch it and not cry. I'm telling you, it is one of my top 10 movies of all time. Now, the second thing that makes me cry every time. Now, this is gonna sound a little crazy, but just hear me out. Just hear me out, okay? The last episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Listen. That scene where Will and Uncle Phil were standing in that empty living room, and everyone was preparing to go their separate ways, and they were giving their final goodbyes. And Will began to tell Uncle Phil that he didn't grow up with siblings and a dad. So spending those last few years with them made him feel like he finally had a family. Then he told Uncle Phil that he wanted him to call him on Sundays, just like he planned to do his other kids, because he loved him and he didn't want to lose touch with them. Then Uncle Phil told that boy that he was his son, okay? And proceeded to hug him. Lord, where is the tissue? Not a dry eye did I have. I was gutted by that genuine display of love. I was like, oh, they doing that good acting today. Now, was that moment that I really did start to appreciate Will's acting skills for real. Like, now, regardless of how you may feel about him as a person, you cannot deny that that man can act. Okay. I can name countless movies that he should have absolutely won multiple awards in. One of his movies that has been really top of mind for me lately has been The Pursuit of Happiness. Again, if you have never seen this movie, I encourage you to check it out. It's based on a true story about Chris Gardner, a man who overcomes homelessness, poverty, and single fatherhood to become a multimillionaire, right? So it's not even the movie itself that is drawing my focus, but more so the concept behind it. This idea that if you do like the gentleman in the film who was persistent and relentless in trying to create a better life for him and his family, that one day you will reach your goals and then you will be happy. Now, at first, I got excited about that thought because I was like, cool, if I just keep plugging away at these dreams, working hard, and keep getting back up and trying again when I get knocked down, then one day I'll be living the life I always dreamed about. And I can live out my life as a happy woman. Then I started thinking about it. And I was like, well, when is one day coming? Like, do I have 2 or 10 more years before I arrive at that destination? Like, what else is it that I am supposed to overcome before my number gets called and I finally run outside, cry happy tears, do the slow clap of gratitude, and walk off into the sunset like Will did at the end of that movie? I feel like if I had some sort of timeline that I could peek at, it might help me stay motivated and on course. Or better yet, if I had tips on how to best pursue happiness, then maybe I could get to it a little faster. So I was like, let me do a little research because maybe I'm just completely misinterpreting the message of this movie. So I started looking up information around the pursuit of happiness, and there's so many competing thoughts around this topic that I just got more confused than when I started. Like, some research suggested you should not wait until you have achieved those key goals you were striving for, like getting a new job or getting married or having kids or whatever your key life goals are, before you experience happiness. Instead, they suggested that you should strive to feel happy all the time, regardless of whether your goals have been reached or not. Now, separate research suggests that it is a bad idea to strive to feel happy all the time because you are inevitably setting yourself up for disappointment because you're not accepting the reality that life is filled with good and bad moments. And if you start to believe that happiness is the only thing that matters, then it becomes that much harder to obtain. In other words, happiness has too many dependencies to try to experience it all the time. There are too many if, when, and then scenarios that have to exist for us to feel happy. You know what I'm talking about? If I get the promotion, then I will be happy. When my kids graduate and move out, then I will be happy. When I can eat all carbs and still lose weight, then I will be happy. So, if waiting until you have achieved the goal to be happy is not the answer, and trying to be happy all the time is not the answer, then what is? No wonder so many people are so miserable. They don't know what to do. Whenever I don't know what to do, I try to go back to the source that always seems to bring me clarity. So I checked the Bible. What stood out to me in my reading was less about pursuing happiness, which is a fleeting emotion that we have very little control over, and more about learning to be content. The specific statement said, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. Or in a different translation, I have learned to be satisfied with the things I have and with everything that happens. Now, I struggled with this thought at first because I used to think that contentment meant settling, like it was the final destination, as if to say, once you have arrived at this state, you no longer wanted more. Your desire or even need to pursue anything greater than where you were or what you had completely diminished, and there was no plans of introducing any new changes into your life. But I was wrong. That's not contentment. That's complacency. There's a huge difference between the two. Complacency says, if I never do or have another thing in this life, I'm good right where I am. I'm not looking for more, so more doesn't need to be looking for me. I don't need to gain another skill, learn another bit of information, or have any new experiences. I'm not convinced that anyone intentionally pursues complacency. I think it's just a state of being that some of us find ourselves in. Like sometimes things like fear and doubt or lack push us in that complacency corner and we just stay there. We convince ourselves that this is the best we can do and we practice the art of limiting our expectations. But contentment says, I can accept where I am and what I have right now. If this is the hand that I've been dealt, I will play this hand to the best of my ability. But I will not close the door on more or better. You can enjoy and be satisfied by the appetizers while still anticipating the main entree, right? I want to be in that place where you fully appreciate what you have and where you are while understanding that you still have options and the ability to pursue those options should you choose. As I try to better adopt this mindset for my life, here are a few things I'm learning about pursuing contentment. The first thing I'm learning is that contentment is a decision. It's not based on feelings because feelings are fickle. They change with the wind, which explains how I can go from laughing at the beginning of a comedy sitcom to crying my eyes out by the ending credits. Unstable, okay? But decisions are calculated and well thought out. They are choices we make with a specific intention in mind. When we choose to be content, what we're saying is we're going to allow this situation, this experience, this emotion to teach us a lesson that will prepare us to handle that unknown situation that's waiting for us in our future. I used to work in the compensation department of an insurance company for about 3 years. One random Monday morning, we got called into a meeting and were told that the company had been acquired by another insurance company and they were dissolving our department because the new company already had a compensation team. Now, I was fresh out of college. I had an apartment, bills, and the only thing that I had in my savings account was the required $25 that you had to have to maintain in that account in order to keep it active. And trust me, if I could have found a way to withdraw that money without closing that account, I wouldn't even have had that in there. Okay. It would have been easy for me to allow my emotions to take over and cause me to panic and just go into this deep depression because of this newfound state that I was in, right? I'm unemployed. I got bills. I got an apartment. I'm trying to be independent. And here I am in this situation that I never anticipated would happen. But instead, I was like, look, Lord, help me to be okay with this situation. And then show me what I need to do so that if I'm ever in this position again, I'm better prepared. Like I decided that I was going to accept the fact that I got laid off, but I was going to remain hopeful and intentional about surviving unemployment and finding a better job. I didn't like how the situation made me feel, but I needed to feel all of those scary emotions so I could learn a very valuable lesson about adapting to change and money management. If I had never been laid off, I would have never known the importance of having an emergency savings. So I had to make some very hard decisions to prepare myself to not only manage my current state, but make sure if I was ever faced with that situation again, I was ready. I gave up my apartment and moved in with my parents to eliminate some bills. I used a portion of my severance to pay off some debt, and the other portion went to start building my savings. I created a budget, and when I did get a new job, I immediately added a line item to have money taken out each month to continue growing that savings account. Then I had to exercise some discipline to keep from going in there and spending the money when I finally moved out of my parents' home. Was I happy about having to give up my apartment to move back home with my parents? No! But I decided to be content because I knew that there was more that I wanted in life. And in order for me to get there, I had to get through this. I feel like that's how Andy Garcia probably felt in that movie. I'm sure his character wasn't happy that his wife was battling alcoholism and creating havoc for their entire family. But I want to believe that he had accepted the state of their lives in that moment and was content with the fact that they were at least still together, managing their chaos in the privacy of their own home, where he had an opportunity to help her work towards a stable place so she could experience happiness again. That's why me and him was so hurt by what she said. We had accepted the state of affairs and were optimistic for better days. Then here she come making us feel bad for taking a positive stance on her behalf. The nerve. That's the thing about contentment. It can coexist with other emotions. You can be unhappy and still be content. Your contentment says that you will allow yourself to go through this unhappy season so that you can experience happier days in the future. You are acknowledging that the lesson you need to learn in that moment is bigger than how you feel. Even when you don't understand what the lesson is, you're creating a space in your mind and in your heart to work through it while not letting it overtake you. Which leads me to the second thing I'm learning on this journey of pursuing contentment. And that is contentment is empowering because it breeds gratitude. Whenever we make a decision to do something, we usually search our minds for reasons to validate why that decision is a good one, right? So let's say I'm going through a divorce and I decide that I'm going to be content with the fact that my marriage is coming to an end. I might not be happy about it. I might even be in pain or hurt or even angry. But I decide I'm going to accept that this is the state that we're in. The first thing my mind does is try to make sense of that decision. It starts to weigh the pros and cons, but because I've already decided that I'm moving forward in spite of, it allows me to better focus on the pros of the situation. Maybe ending this relationship will allow me to finally live in peace. Maybe it releases me of the responsibility of having to make compromises that I never wanted to make. Maybe it allows me to refocus my energy on discovering who I am and how I want to live in the future. Maybe the only good thing that I can think of that this relationship provided was that it allowed me to have a child or children that I deeply love and appreciate. And now I can focus on pouring more energy into connecting with them. Or maybe I realize once we start divvying up these assets, then I'm going to be in a better position than I thought. But once gratitude has been activated for the silver linings in the situation, it empowers me to regain control of my actions. I can now decide I'm not going to sit around here crying all day. I'm going to prepare myself for my next chapter. I'm going to map out my reinvention plan. So when this thing is over, I can step out as a new person, more confident, more wisdom, more experience. Will there be days that I remember that I'm going through a divorce and I break down and decide to shut in and lay around on the couch grieving my marriage? Sure. Contentment is not about pretending that things are perfect. It's about committing to keep striving in the midst of an imperfect situation, putting forth an honest effort when that's really all you have left to give. The last thing I'm learning, and really the secret behind all of this, is that the only way to obtain true contentment is to be in partnership with God. The wisdom, sanity, and motivation you will need to believe in better days when your whole world starts crumbling around you comes from your belief that He has equipped you with everything you need to handle it. The same way Will found reassurance in the fact that Uncle Phil said he would call him on Sundays when he calls his other kids, we have to be reassured that God will show up for us when we need Him too. Now, Will's character in the movie portrayed this even more. We didn't see a man who was overwhelmed with glee in every scene, displaying excessive amounts of positive emotions. What we saw was a man who decided to face the new realities of his life as they were revealed each day and adapt to his circumstances while believing that God would give him the strength and ability to achieve more despite how he felt in that moment. God's strength is what allows us to do all things, right? Which reaffirms the fact that contentment requires action. It requires us to fully accept our reality, commit to keep striving in spite of that reality, and partner with Him. In hindsight, they probably should have changed the name of that movie to The Pursuit of Contentment. Unfortunately, life is not a movie that we can just turn on and off when we want, or sit back and watch as characters work through its unpredictable troubles. We have all been cast in this same unscripted docuseries, praying that we get the green light to return for another season. While we are here playing out these roles, we might as well try to make the most of them. The pursuit of contentment is a learning process that we intentionally practice day over day, whether we are happy or not. I want us to spend this season trying to discover how we can practice this process even in the midst of our worst experiences. Let's grab God's hand and walk this journey out together. It may end in tears, like most of the movies I watch, but I'm confident that when the final story is told, it will be one of victory. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with a friend. Post about it on social media, or feel free to leave a rating and review. And of course, follow or subscribe to the Thrive with Joy podcast on your favorite streaming platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts, to make sure you're notified when new episodes are available. All new episodes are released on Mondays. Until next time, family, I pray that God bless you to live in peace and thrive with joy.